Hello and welcome back to revise GCSE history.co.uk. This video today is the first video in the topic of 20th century medicine, and when we're talking about the 20th century we are talking about the 1900s. So in this video today it's the first video in the topic of 20th century medicine. And specifically in this video we are going to be looking at the development of X-rays and blood transfusions, as they were two key developments made in the 1900s. So firstly, let's have a look at the development of X-rays. X-rays had first been discovered before the war. We're talking about World War I, and before the war we're talking about before 1914, because World War I began in 1914. So X-rays have been discovered, I think, about 30 years before the war, but it was the First World War which really confirmed the importance of X-rays in surgery. More machines were manufactured and installed in all major hospitals along the Western Front. X-rays helped to improve the success rate of surgery. They made it possible for surgeons to remove deeply lodged bullets and shrapnel that would have otherwise caused fatal infections. So, X-ray machines made it possible for surgeons to remove bullets that were deeply lodged in the body, or shrapnel that was lodged inside the body that would have caused an infection and caused the patient to die. X-rays made this more easily. This picture up here shows a spinal X-ray from an X-ray machine today, and what happens with an X-ray, a bit more than you need to know, but just a bit of background information. The X-ray film, the photographic film, starts off white, and the black bits are where X-rays are transmitted through soft tissue. So like X-rays are transmitted through the flesh, and that's where the black forms. The white bit that's left behind is where no X-rays can pass through, and X-rays cannot pass through bone or metal, and instead they're absorbed. So through using X-rays, surgeons would know where a deeply lodged bullet or a bit of shrapnel was in the body. So that's X-rays. Next thing we need to look at is blood transfusion. In the 1800s, mysteriously, sometimes blood transfusions were successful and sometimes they failed. So sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. In 1900, we've talked about this in a previous video I'll just say, when we were talking about overcoming the problem of bleeding in surgery. We talked about early blood transfusions and how they were attempted after the work of William Harvey in 1628. However, they sometimes ended disastrously, although sometimes they worked. This was because there were different blood groups, and these had not been discovered until 1900. In the 1900, a German scientist called Dr. Karl Landsteiner discovered there are different blood groups in somebody's blood, and that the transfusion of blood only works if the donor's blood group matches the receiver's blood group. It must be the same group used, or the transfusion won't work. This discovery made blood transfusion practical, although in the years before the war it was still performed with on-the-spot donors. This meant that if you were going to have a blood transfusion during surgery, the donor had to be right there in the operating theatre to transfer the blood on the spot. This was because doctors had no way of storing blood properly. It often coagulated or clotted. They couldn't store it properly. Bit more about blood transfusion then. So blood transfusions during World War I. During the First World War, vast amounts of blood were needed. So lots of blood were needed. This made on-the-spot donors difficult. In the trenches, if we had lots of different people needing a blood transfusion very quickly before they died, it would be really impractical to have an on-the-spot donor in the trenches. So scientists began to search for a better way of storing blood, as often soldiers bled to death in the trenches before blood could get to them. So war as a factor added to the urgency to find a better way of storing blood. Scientists discovered that plasma, which is the liquid part of the blood, could be separated from corpuscles, and they're the tiny little particles in the blood. The cells could be bottled, packed in ice, and stored close to where they were needed. This made blood transfusion more practical. So, the final bit we need to cover on blood transfusions. The discovery of a better method of storing blood helped to save many lives during the First World War, but it didn't just stop there. So after the war, there were further developments in blood transfusion. In 1940, a freeze-dried plasma was developed. This was a better way of storing blood, freeze-dried plasma. An anticoagulant solution, which is a solution that stops blood from clotting so it can be stored, was developed in 1943. Not coincidentally, but interestingly, that's during World War II. So it was developed further during the World War II. All of these developments are actually during World War II, so that's quite interesting, that war as a factor has helped the development of blood transfusion, be it World War I or World War II. And then in 1944, the development of a method of freezing blood was created. So here are just some final steps in the development of blood transfusion. So, that is the end of everything we need to cover for this video today. Here are a few quick questions based on the content of today's video. You may wish to pause the video here, scribble down some answers to these questions yourselves. If not, feel free to carry on watching and we'll do the answers together. Okay, so the answers. Question 1. Give 2 surgical procedures that World War I surgeons could carry out more successfully due to the development of X-rays. Removing bullets, deeply lodged bullets from the body, removing shrapnel. Next question, question 2. Why were blood groups discovered and who discovered them? When were they discovered? They were discovered in 1900 by Dr. Carl Landsteiner. I think that's how you spell his name. Oh, also, just a key point about that, there is a little bit of discrepancy over when blood groups were discovered. Some people say 1900, some people say 1901, but it's around that day. In the exam, they'll let you write either 1900 or 1901. I always think it's 1900, but the textbook actually says 1901, so I wouldn't worry too much about that yourself. I don't know why there's discrepancy over that date. During World War I, but obviously around that date you'll be fine. During World War I, question 3, what was the problem with on-the-spot donors? Well, I forgot to use a different colour. They were in practical vast amounts of blood needed. It was just crazy to have an on-spot donor. Many people often died in the trenches before blood could get to them. Final question, question 4. What did scientists try to develop to improve blood transfusions? A better method of storing the blood. There we are. Better method of storing the blood. So there are the answers to the 4 quick quiz questions. You may notice as we've gone through the videos and progressed through the topics, my handwriting with this stylus has got probably a lot better. Just noticed that myself. Thanks for watching the video today. The next video in this topic is on the magic bullets that were developed during the 20th century. If you found this stuff useful, head over to the website revisegcsehistory.co.uk or check out my YouTube channel, Revise GCSE History. Thanks for watching, see you guys again very soon.